Jim Beebe and Lucas Laurie, and we're starting off the year with a bang. We have Athlete Builder podcast up and running. Today, we're already laughing before we started recording. We got Dr. Todd McDougle on today, Doctor of Chiropractic Care. So a few things about Todd before we get going. He's known as the Strongman Doc, and I've known him for a number of years. Been to our gym a number of times, helps out with our contests with powerlifting, strongman games, but a little bit about the good doctor. Like I said, of chiropractic, he's a fellow of International Chiropractors Association. So on the international level, been on the board locally in Indiana with the the board of directors with the ICA Indiana. Been there as well. He's published. He works on lecture series, textbooks. He has his own methodologies in which he brings on other chiropractors and brings them up to speed, helps them indoctrinate into the world and dealing with athletes. So not only is he a good doctor dealing with athletes, but he's worked at the international level. And by and large, he simply makes an impact. The whole thing about Dr. Todd, though, is that this wasn't where he got started. He's been doing it 25 years, but before that, he was big into lifting himself, a lot of bodybuilding, and we'll get into this. Strongman himself. So just for context, my favorite number is deadlift 500 for 20 and some other stuff too along with it, but I always love that number. But you can find him all over. He's on the north side of Indianapolis, and what we have here today is a fun guy. Known him for a number of years. I see him at the Arnold, see him all the time, and so Dr. Todd, Strongman Doc, thanks for coming on the show today. Welcome. Good to have you.
Thanks, Jim. I always enjoy spending time with you.
Appreciate that. I know how true that is. So,
well, especially when you buy wings. I like that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
so when we
that just seals the deal for me.
That's part of the deal. You know, Todd always comes down to our events and volunteers his time. And it's usually his only ask is that he gets a T-shirt, which isn't a big deal. Yeah. I'm happy to do that. But then there's probably wings and beer afterwards, so that's always good. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and you actually have an event coming up here shortly, too.
We do, yeah. Jan's coming up 26th of January, and then 2 weeks later we have a CrossFit competition, and then in April we have USPC's regionals for powerlifting, but also USPC. They're holding nationals at our gym this year, too. So.
Oh, great. So, Cody Robbins is working with you on that project, right?
Yeah, Cody, yeah.
Known Cody for a long time. Good people.
Yeah, good people. He is absolutely reliable. So, Doc, give the crowd a little bit of a background on you as an athlete first before we talk about you as the doctor and healer. So, talk about, where you spent your time and what endeavors, whether it was growing up, high school, and then college. But I know you got into bodybuilding pretty heavily too. So, just a little background, a little bit of color.
Well, in the 70s, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a big deal. Frank Zane, Mike Metzner, Danny Padilla, Ed Corney, all these legends. Lee Haney, in the 80s, 90s. Franco Colombo, who himself is a chiropractor. Those were the guys, those were the people that I would go ahead and buy the magazines that were basically like a newspaper on the inside, and on the outside they had this slick cover. So There was even a photo of Andreas Colling one time. I think they'd cut his calf off on the front side of it or something like that. So somebody just kind of goofed up on the image, right?
Right.
But no, I mean, for me, I tended to be kind of a skinny kid, kind of a beanpole, was always pretty lanky. I did some wrestling. I was a varsity wrestler when I was a freshman in high school. And so decided to go ahead and try and do everything I could to gain weight, gain muscle, gain that physique, and pretty much look amazing. However, it was really a challenge for me. It really was, because, even in high school as a senior, I was still probably almost 6'3" by then. Finished out, height-wise at about 6'3", 195 pounds as a senior. But with that weightlifting, I just kind of tapped into some of the powerlifting stuff as well. So by the time I was a senior in high school, I had a 410-pound bench press. which actually was the biggest bench press for almost 20 years for that weight class. So didn't do it in contests, so I guess it doesn't count, right? But back then we didn't have cameras or YouTube or Instagram or InstaTwitFace or whatever the heck it is, right? But
Right.
I did it, and I remember the basketball coach coming in one time, and he's like, "Yeah, I hear you can lift some weights." And I go, "Yeah, I do all right." And he's like, "I hear you could do 410 pounds." And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Let me see." So I went ahead, put the rack up there, and I think I finished out at 400. Wasn't able to go ahead and get much higher than that. And so as that was the case, the end result was as well, I'll believe anything you say now, boy.
Right. Most people
So
need to see it to believe it. So help build some credibility.
always, yeah, and that's the thing that's, I think, challenging even, today within the chiropractic realm, is that there are so many out there, and at the end of the day, not very many can bring it. And I always bring it. You know me.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. For sure. For sure.
So,
So
but
did you
no,
continue with bodybuilding right after high school?
yeah, I did. My uncle Steve and I actually went down to Evansville, and I competed down there and got my butt kicked. But just at a 6'3" frame requires a lot of mature muscle. It
Right.
really does. So, I kept training. I kept doing my thing. And even in my first strongman contest in 1999, I only weighed 226 pounds, something like that. So,
Gotcha.
and then almost blew my knee out. And so decided, well, maybe I'm never going to be world's strongest man. But anyway, in between there, I suffered a pretty nasty injury. Just to kind of waffle back and forth here, I guess, a little bit. In 1988, I almost lost an arm in an industrial accident, and they were talking about cutting that arm off.
Man, and we have a picture, and we'll end up posting that because it was significant. But so you said it was an industrial accident. You almost lost your arm. They wanted to cut it off, but were able to rehab through it.
Well, and the interesting thing is that it was a part-time job, and I was sweeping. The broom got caught in the open rollers, and it sucked me in with the broom. And the rollers are
Okay.
about the size of a 55-gallon drum, rolling about 30 mile an hour. And I had latched on to an upright for the conveyor system and was doing a real for-life Viking hold for 8 minutes while my arm was being pulled off my body.
Oh, my goodness. So
Yep.
how did you survive it? Someone come and save you?
Honestly, I was just going through a divorce, and I was really just pissed off.
Really?
And I remember looking up the sky and go, "This is all you got, God? Bring it."
No shit.
Yeah, I was pissed. And
And then quit.
it's interesting. I'm not like a super religious guy. Obviously I believe in good and evil, and I do believe certain things in regards to standardized religion, I guess. But I'm going to tell you what, I was very mad at God for a while.
Blamed him?
No, not entirely.
Just
But
upset.
I was upset. Yeah, and
Did you
that
make peace
really
with that?
ruined my day.
Did you make peace with it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
I think that's
from there, you
important.
continued to lift though, and compete even after the injury.
Yeah, I had dropped all the way down to 165 pounds. My muscles had all wasted. I lost half my bicep. I missing my entire brachialis. They had to shave some of the tricep off because it was rotting off my body. And in order to rebuild my arm as best they could, they cut the first latissimus out of my back. It failed, so they went ahead and cut a vessel out of my lower leg, and then they took my other lat. So from that was in 1988, and there were multiple surgeries, probably 16 smaller surgeries, 3 very, very big ones, which almost took my life again. Went into BP shock, and I remember the last thing that I was watching the doctors do, they said, we're losing him, and the guy's getting up on the chair, squeezing IV bags to try and, do whatever. And then I was out, and I didn't see any holy light or anything like that. So I think I have work to do.
Gotcha. So you
Right?
got sent back to from Mount Olympus. to
Right.
help out us in a normal.
I think I rolled down the hill or down
Well,
the mountain of Mount Olympus is probably what happened.
gotcha.
But no, afterwards, back at in 1997, or I'm sorry, 1993, I was back on stage, and my good arm I'd build up to 21 inches natural.
Okay.
I had
So when you
never
compete,
used any juice.
you're still competing against everybody else, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. They didn't have a special division back then, just like
Gotcha.
strongman. I was one of
Right.
the first disabled strongman athletes in the
Now,
world.
now they have their own division, but back then it's either pick it up and win or don't pick it up and lose, right?
Yeah, so you just pick it up.
Right.
Right. There's
So then,
something wrong with me too, Jim. That's why I get along with strongman athletes so well. There's must be something wrong, right?
people ask me to characterize what's the sport all about. And I said we mostly just pick up stupid shit, and not much more to it than that. Can we move it quickly? Then we probably win.
Yeah,
But,
and it's just it's really you against it, I think, and you against your own mind. And I think for me that is something that has held true while I sat in the hospital bed while they debated whether or not to go ahead and amputate my arm while I'm sitting there trying to wiggle my thumb. Just trying to get some neurology back in it, right? And it twitched. And the doctor came in a week later on a Friday, and he says, "We had you scheduled for amputation on Monday."
no kidding.
Yeah, yeah. Which would have really sucked because then they would call me lefty all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like that phrase at the end of Game of Thrones when they simply say "not today." So let's get into that piece. You're looking at a possible amputation. You can't wiggle your thumb. What's going through your head about your future lifting weights as an adult, etc.? All these things got to be running through your head. What's that? I can't identify with that. So what's that like?
I think it's a matter of overcoming adversity again.
Sure.
I'm one of those people, from the time I was a kid that, really wasn't wanted, in their lives, I guess. And so for me, I was always felt like a third wheel, the kid that was just kind of in the road, So for me, it was a matter of, okay, you've got one person to depend on, me. So
no one's coming to save you, kind of deal.
And that persists in life today.
Sure.
I don't have a backup plan. So what that means is I'm all in, whatever I do. And you know how I am. I get a little bit feisty sometimes. And I got a lot more feisty after my injury because it was sink or swim. It was do or not do. And the end result, since it was an accident at work, there's a workman's comp component to it. Well, workman's comp isn't designed to do anything other than to milk money out of whatever victim falls into the workman's comp system. And they have no intention of getting anybody well, as far, from my perspective. At the end of it, it's like when they can't milk any more money out of the insurance program, the doctors, the caregivers, the people who are in charge of those programs, what ends up happening is they give you a consolation prize. Oh, well, you're now handicapped and now you have a lifetime of disability. Congratulations. You should be getting a check soon.
Mm.
And
that's not
dude,
you.
that's not me.
That's not your personality at all. Mm-mm.
No. I mean, so the thing is truly, I could have been, at home with the curtains closed, hooked on Halcyon, and drinking Heinekens all day long, and that was going to be my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I made the long walk to the YMCA up in Warsaw, Indiana. I literally walked, and it was like 5 miles, and hopped on a bike, and I started back. And got to a point, by the time 1993 come around, I was back on stage.
Okay. How long was the total recovery time from the injury to being back on stage?
88 to 93. So that's
5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. So,
I agree.
and that is being totally emaciated, 165 pounds, and beefed up to about, I think I was 225 pounds lean, about 4% body fat. And that's
Dang.
missing all those body parts. So that's still pretty good, but still too skinny.
Right.
You know.
You know, that's a Joe Rogan comment or Mike Tyson or whatever, but it was essentially, if you see anyone that's really persistent later in life, they've achieved something, they built a business, they built themselves, whatever, physically, you name it. The commonality is that there was some level of severe pain earlier on that they had to get through. Such that once you get through that one time, I would say confidence comes from reps. Well, that one rep, a 5-year rep, to get back, from that point on, it becomes this huge gift, such that when you are faced with adversity again, a challenge again, there can't be any like fear. I don't know if I can get through this. It's just like, okay, this is simply what's next.
Yeah.
There's no, I'm not sure. There's no hesitation. It's like, hey, I can handle it. I've handled this before. I'm good. COVID hits. I'm good. Employee leaves. I'm good. Wife leaves. I'm good. Get hit by a tornado. I'll be all right. So it's really, it's too bad that you or I will have to go through such pain to have that level of confidence later. But once you get through it, that's going to carry you the rest of your life saying, I can handle things, right?
Well, the problem is there is a misinterpretation, I think, that others may have from what it is they see. You know, the majority of the people out there that I've treated over the last 25 years in strength sports have no idea that I've overcome what I have.
Yeah, right.
You know, they
You
make
want
an
to say,
assumption.
sure, no one's going to be able to tell. And you look like some regular guy who can handle themselves physically. And you're moving fellas that are between 300 and 450 pounds around. You're manipulating them physically. That doesn't happen with someone that's weak. And you're doing it with missing legit body parts.
Well, the other thing too is that, I mean, in part, I had to design. Of course, Chad Coy got me involved in Strongman in 1998, and so his number one question is like, "Hey, Doc," he goes, "I love getting chiropractic," but he said, I feel sprung afterwards, and everyone else feels sprung, and so for me that led me on a completely different journey, and I had to design literally technique applications that suited me, but also at the same time reduce the risk of an alteration, a negative alteration from the chiropractic adjustment for neuromuscular recruitment, and have done that. And that's what my methodology is all about. And now I've taken care of literally over half of the world title holders for World's Strongest Man and many of the female athletes on the other side as well. So I've gone from being handicapped, like I said, Halcyon and Heineken in a closed room with the hopelessness, to taking care of the top strength athletes on planet Earth because I made a decision.
That's it. It's the decision and the resolve. I'm taking a different path.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
I was on a path. It wasn't the run I wanted, though. Right.
Sure. Yeah, I get that. For 15 years, I worked in the financial world, JP Morgan, and with an MBA. Like, this wasn't the path I wanted to be in. I wanted to work with athletes and be an athlete and see what I can do physically, and then help others as well. So something completely different changes. And there was just an article about us, a local paper, and it pointed out that it said in the article, this is true. It's what I told the reporter. There were very, very high metrics at JP Morgan, and then in 2012, they decided, hey, we're just getting rid of my entire team because we didn't quite measure up. So we had to bring in 100 million in assets, and we brought in 60 that year. So they said, time to go. And I'm like, I took that time to reevaluate things. I'm like, I'm going a different direction. And it's been a gift, that adversity, but also the chance to get some clarity and identify really what I want to do. So impacting these folks and making a difference. A lot of similarities with your path and mine, that things change, and 10 years, 15, 20, in your case, 25 years down the road, just helping athletes get better. So nice job, Doc. I'm impressed. I love the story because I love the resilience. I love one of our core values is sisu, a Finnish word, and it simply means don't ever give up, don't ever quit. And when you're suicidal or looking at addiction, you just hang on and keep fighting. So the fact that you have lived that, I always have tremendous admiration, and so thank you.
Oh, you bet. I don't want you to think it's all up, though. I mean, there's plenty of dark moments when you're by yourself, and even now. I mean, things aren't going quite the way that you feel like they should be, and I'm still faced with adversities and things like that. And there are dark days, and you got to pull yourself out of it. It can be done, but it's in your head. You got to decide again. And sometimes you have to decide every day,
And have that conviction every day, because there's challenges every day. And you're running a small business, there's always challenges, right? There's competition, there's dealing with customers, and there's dealing with your staff. And you have to make that conscious decision that, hey, I'm going to be uncomfortable today, still need to move forward, right?
It's funny. My wife will often say, she goes, you just seem like such a pessimist. And I go, you know what? I look at everything for what it is. I say it out loud so that I can call out the demon I'm fighting that day. And then I go to war. And, I've got two options. Again, sink or swim, right? Win or lose. So
right.
I just look at myself as an eternal optimist, right?
You think I'll be able to handle it, right?
Well, you got to get through it.
So when did you start? When was your first World's Strongest Man event where you started working there?
Actually, believe it or not, 2023 was the first opportunity I had to work at World's Strongest Man on the payroll. It took me 25 years of volunteer work and proving myself to the point that I wasn't just another doctor to get on that level.
So you've been going to the contest, you've been working on the athletes for 25 years on your own dime, flying all over the world, right?
Yeah.
And then making it happen. And it wasn't until last year they said, hey, you know what? We think you're on to something. We're better having you here. Here's some money.
If it wasn't for Becky Wilson, now McLean, it wouldn't have happened. She really pushed. She pushed for 2 years to help make that happen. Now, here's the other thing, all right? Becky came in under my wing at the Arnolds, right? And so all these years later, she returns the favor and helps me get in World's Strongest Man. But there was one guy who's no longer with the company that apparently just thought, well, what do we need another doctor for? And she's like, you don't understand. He's not just another doctor. He's the Strongman Doc.
Right.
What do you do?
That's awesome.
So I don't know. I hope I'll be back. There's nothing for sure, but I'm hopeful. But that was exciting.
So you've been there when Magnuson was competing, Bill Kazmaier, but all, Big Z, everybody, Brian Shaw.
Well, yeah, it's so funny because, I mean, all those guys show up now at World's Strongest Man, right? But my first time I actually ever met Magnus was in 2000 at one of Chad Coy's competitions. And that was pretty cool. I actually treated a fella at that time, too, a tall guy. I think he was from Virginia, fireman. He later ended up winning World's Strongest Man one time. I think it's a fellow by the name Phil Pfister.
No kidding.
So that was the first time I actually got to meet him as well. And over the years, I actually treated quite a few competitive level World's Strongest Man athletes, people like Brian Schoonfield, for example, Carl Gillingham, those kind of guys. And then, of course, a lot of the new pros, people like Jefferson Metters, Cameron Heflin, a bunch of those guys. I got to meet a bunch of people through Chad, obviously, and I really owe him a lot of thanks. But at the end of the day, I had to put up or shut up. as far as technique, applications, success rates. And a lot of people are, don't realize that the job that I had for 25 years on competitions as small as 10 athletes to as many as almost 500 athletes, I was not allowed to miss once.
Mm-hmm. They want to know the reliability, and you keep thinking you're just going to fade away, and next thing you know, hey, he's still here. Another year shows up, and he's still here.
Still here, still at it. I don't know. Might be in the Guinness Book of World Records or something like that one of these days. We'll see. But so far, nobody has been able to duplicate what I've done in strength sports as a provider, which is pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. Some of those characters, though, that you've seen, like, you watch on the History Channel, and they have the special with Brian Shaw and Eddie and everyone else, any stories stand out like you will not believe this one time?
Yeah, the funny thing is, I remember the first time I met Eddie Hall. That was like in 2015, and he was coming up on stage, and it's really kind of interesting because I actually kind of brushed by him in 2012 when I was over in Ireland, working at one of Big Daddy Glenn Ross's contests for the Ultimate Strongman Championships. That was in Belfast, Ireland, which was a pretty cool trip. But Eddie was actually there. But later in 2015, I was able to go ahead and bump into Eddie at the Arnold's. And so I went ahead and delivered the first Strongman Doc Smackdown to Eddie Hall. And he really wasn't expecting all of that.
No kidding.
He lets out a holler. Oh, my God, what is going on? It was great. And I said, well, I'm putting things back where they belong. And he goes, I just thought you're going to rub me ass. And I go, no, I don't do that.
Right.
So, but yeah, I the first time I met Brian Shaw was over at one of Chad Coy's contests. And that was the first time I'd met Steve Slater, too, who is famous for his Slater logs.
And the stones, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been, friends with those guys ever since. And yeah, it's pretty wild. But I think one of the biggest surprises that I had, that even today I think is still pretty cool. There was a young fella from Great Britain that I was, always seemed like a nice kid. I was excited to meet him. We were at Brian Shaw's Shaw Classic. I think it was the second one that he had put on, and so I got to meet this kid, and it was like, and I look at him, I go, it is so nice to meet you, is what I told him. And I said, I was excited for you to come across the pond and us be able to chit chat. And he goes, you don't remember me, do you? And I go, huh? He goes, well, you took care of me when I was in the juniors, when you were in Ireland in 2012. And he said, I've gained like 100 pounds since then.
Yeah.
And I go, oh my God, are you kidding me? And he goes, yeah, it's Adam Bishop.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Dang.
And he said, I couldn't wait to get back and see you again, Doc.
No kidding.
Do you know how cool that is?
That is that, yeah. There's those small moments like, I remember, I think it was Eddie Cohen was talking about this, and Matt Winning, or something along the lines, where one of them hit a lift, and the other one looked at him, just kind of give him a little nod. You're like, shoot, it's worth more than the money. It's that moment that, hey, you belong, you make an impact, you're making a big deal. Now, how big is Brian, though, like size-wise? It's hard to even.
Well, he's 6'8". I think probably he might have maxed out about, I would say maybe about 440, maybe. Right. I know, it's interesting when you go ahead and you talk to the guys and they'll go ahead and they announce the weights and whatever, and it's kind of like, he's bigger than that. I know half floor, there was the last competition that he did at the Arnold's. That man was the biggest I'd ever seen him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were 3 chairs that, regular people-sized chairs, kind of like what you'd have at a cafeteria or whatever, and we're all sitting there, in the rules meeting, and I'm sitting behind, him, and the widest, biggest, most in shape human being I've ever seen, ever, and his shoulders are almost as wide as his 3 chairs.
Right.
And I would swear that he was easily 450, 460 pounds.
Yeah.
The man was incredibly big.
We had Tom Berry on from Westside Barbell. He's running the show now that Louie's gone, and he said that when he was interning for Louie, he's at a meet, and I can't for the life of me remember the athlete's name, but Tom's sitting there behind him, and the guy's sitting on 2 chairs. And Tom's just like leaning forward. I just gotta touch that guy. How big is that guy? And I was like, you just don't get it. You don't see that. You see on TV that person's larger without the context. You have no idea.
Yeah, I've been able. It's funny because in my career, I have been able to take care of the largest, strongest human beings on the planet. And so, whether it be, Obi or Robert Oberst, Tommy Stoltman, Brian Shaw, Half Thor, those guys, is there anyone bigger? Not yet.
Not yet.
And learning how to facilitate a proper adjustment to go ahead and enhance their performance, that was key. And so I really wish people in my profession would, really consider the experiences that I have, because it can make a huge difference in the performance of the athletes they treat. And so this is why I've developed the strongmandoc.world concept, where we're tagging our lecture series to organizations such as Official Strongman Games, Official Strongman, Giants Live, and eventually, most likely, World's Strongest Man. And, we could have tagged that with anybody. I know Willie Wessels with United States Strongman was the first one to jump on board with us. So we're going to be doing an education program tied in with the not the Central USA, but the Southern Illinois Strength Expo that Ryan Cooling and Chelsea Morgan's putting together. Awesome. And so we're going to be doing a lecture there, and that'll be tied in with United States Strongman. But no, my goal is to help athletes worldwide by teaching chiropractors, 1, how to be chiropractors again, and 2, treating athletes from a chiropractic perspective that's very unique, that's taken 25 years to develop in such a way that it is consistent, so that you aim small, miss small.
Right.
Because I would love everybody to have the same record that I've had over the last 25 years in no misses.
Let me ask you this. So the application, you're dealing with these larger folks, hard to manipulate, a lot of muscle mass. Does that still apply to the regular population? Because if you look at the U.S. population, they're getting heavier and fatter and more unhealthy. So not necessarily some of those folks that have as much muscle mass as, say, Brian Shaw, but they're still 400-pound males and females that need adjustments. I would think the experience of dealing with the one group would help translate and prepare you dealing with the other group. Is that right?
Absolutely. The other thing that's very interesting too is that I've been able to extrapolate the technique applications in such a way that it also works very well with people with artificial hips, rods and screws in their back, plates in their neck, artificial knees. So basically what I'm talking about is post-surgical chiropractic applications that are consistent as well, based upon the technique design for strongman athletes. So now we've got a crossover from competition into the clinical. And it's huge, because we've got people that are flying in from Spain, driving from Mexico, coming from Canada, all over the United States, doing, consultations in Sweden and Norway and Chile and all over the world. It's just mind-boggling what a choice that I made all those years ago has now influencing people and athletes all over the planet. It's awesome. Pretty cool. And I hope that that's inspirational for people. You just never know. I mean, the universe, it can all come together, right?
I was just talking. We had another guy on, and we were asking about nutrition. And the guy simply said, there's still so much we don't know about the body and what it does and how
Mm-hmm.
what we do impacts it. So still don't know, even in your line of work, there's still things to learn about how things evolve and how your practice impacts athletes. There's still plenty more to learn after you and I are dead and gone.
Well, I really wish that we could see chiropractors continue the art, philosophy, and science of chiropractic itself. But what we're finding is that there's an abandonment, even at the college level, where it's really about making money for a $300,000 education. And so we have a lot of chiropractors that are doing massage, which makes no sense to me. Why in the world would you spend $300,000 so you could be called doctor to go ahead and do massage? And if you're going to do massage, you could go ahead and get ART and a wide variety of other applications, as far as education wise. And maybe $20,000. Save yourself $280,000 and just go be a massage therapist if that's what you want to do. Be great at it, of course. It's like my buddy Michael Van Dyne. The man's amazing. Doesn't need to be a chiropractor. We need him to do massage because he's talented. But instead, we've got chiropractors that are getting out of chiropractic college and they're trying to do Mike's job, or they're trying to do PT, or they're trying to do your job, or they're trying to do the job of an exercise physiologist, or anything but figure out how to adjust people and enhance their lives through the adjustment. It may take time to get good at anything, especially chiropractic. But
So
people
help me.
need to go ahead and embrace their mentors and elders in the profession instead of trash canning them and thinking that, well, because they're not the newest Instagram rage, whatever it is, there's no value in what they do. It's like an old coach. Old coach has wisdom. Old Mick that took care of Rocky.
Right.
Hey, took him all the way, baby. Right.
Sure did.
And
So
that's what I want to do in chiropractic. But I think I want to try and get this next generation trained before my time ends.
right. Dealing with athletes, high school kids, college kids, and then there's pros. A lot of times, most athletes are going to, at some point, have to lift some weights, do some sprints, do whatever. Then they're going to have to also compete in their sport. So one of the things, John Stockton, the famous Hall of Fame point guard for the Jazz, he was asked, how did I endure all those days, all those games, all those practices of getting bumped around, pushed around, knocked down against all those bigger fellas? He goes, on game day, I got adjusted 4 different times. 4 different times from this chiropractor, you got adjusted 4 different times. So just give her like a high level, 30,000 foot overview of why the spine and the hips and everything else needs to be, and shoulders need to be manipulated, given the athlete's workload in the weight room, training, on the field, on the court. Give us all a little bit of perspective on why it's important, how it's beneficial, and how it unlocks people for performance.
Well, I think in order to do that appropriately, we need to try and revisit what a chiropractor even is, because nobody knows. Even the chiropractors graduating, they don't even know what a chiropractor is anymore. But if you go ahead and you go back to chiropractic at its very beginning, it all had to do with a guy who had lost his hearing and had it restored after a bone got put back into place. About 20 years prior to that, there was a guy by the name of Andrew Still who created this thing called osteopathy. The osteopathy, focus was humeral rhythm or blood flow. Okay, so you go ahead and you put a bone back into place, then the blood flow, which is tied in with health, actually is all restored, right? And so that was St. Louis, Missouri, I think, was the school where Andrew Still created osteopathy and then went ahead and started teaching people. And you got to remember, this is all back in the time of prairie medicine. Okay, so the only people that actually were doing surgery or real doctors, they all came from Europe. They were trained in Europe back then. And then they would go ahead and come over here to the United States, go ahead and do prairie medicine. And then after that, then, or surgery or dentistry or both, right? Because a lot of times the dentists and the surgeons were the same person. So you're removing molars and removing bullets, right?
Right.
Which is kind of interesting if you think about it. So just kind of get a framework as far as timeline, that's what we're dealing with. So in 1895, we actually had this guy by the name of D.D. Palmer, who actually was from Canada originally, was a magnetic healer. It set up in Davenport, Iowa, and had a magnetic healing center. And obviously, manipulation was a thing. Granted, Andrew Still, had brought up the osteopathy thing, and so D.D. Palmer was like, well, you know what? Let's see what happens. Well, obviously, he's thinking, the ear probably really doesn't have much to do with blood. Probably has more to do with nervous system stuff, right? So you go ahead and open that up, and the guy was able to hear. I think I'm on to something different. So he called it, chiropractic. Chiro meaning by hand practice, or practice of. So basically, that's where that come from, chiropractic. And then was it 1897 was the very first class of or for chiropractic at Palmer School of Chiropractic in Davenport, Iowa.
Oh, good.
Interesting, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
as time went on, he postulated more and more about how the nervous system, the brain, the communication, all that was super important. And so the whole idea was to remove interference. Okay, so like a brain surgeon or a neurosurgeon would go ahead and take, a bone that's smashing something, or tissue that's jamming something up, or, a 2x4 sticking out your head, right? Whatever the case may be. The idea is to remove that so that the body would go ahead and respond in a normal, balanced behavior, or what they would call homeostasis, right? So
Right.
any interference with your nervous system causes what they used to call in the old days dis-ease, right? So not disease, but dis-ease. And any dis-ease leads to a breakdown in your health, right? So we kind of went super retro on you right in through here, but the concept remains. Anytime I treat somebody, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to create an environment in which the nervous system is maximally functioning within normal parameters. Okay? Now,
Getting
the
rid of all the
interesting,
obstacles.
yeah. So the really interesting thing is that the brain has to communicate to the little toe. How can I open that space up to get that done? Now, here's the other thing. There's so many neurological components within the tendons, the ligaments, the discs, the bellies of the muscles themselves. The bone has neurology in it, right? When you go ahead and you take a reflex hammer and you hit the knee, do you know that doesn't even go to your brain? That kick reflex, that cycles, and it's called a monosynaptic reflex, right? So collectively, all of those arcs can be all unwound neurologically to create that ease. The neat thing that I figured out is how not only to create ease, but to increase the neuromuscular recruitment in such a way that immediately after the adjustment, you're looking at about a 20% increase in power right off the table. So not only do you have normalized motion patterns based upon the bony skeletal anatomy, we also have changed the dynamic on a monosynaptic level, but also a collective, so that you change that entire dynamic to where now everything is on. That's what I do.
That's what you do.
Which is pretty cool.
It is. So not only do you get them right, you take their potential and add 20%.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
And listen, now people are like, oh, well, I can't believe that. You know what? I've done powerlifting events, and I've watched people put 20 pounds per 100 increase at the event, at contest. Okay? And I know in Strongman, I do the same doggone thing.
Same thing.
Now, that is a lot of weight. But here's the other side of it. You know that guy that you were talking about who had to have 4 adjustments? Do you know we have 5 max effort events in most of the strongman contests, don't we?
Almost everything's a max effort event. Either lifting something very, very heavy for 5 reps or 8 reps at most, or you're picking up something very heavy and moving it. So
you would be
all 90% and above for most folks, and it's for a minute. One squat down and up is what, at worst, if you're grinding it out 10 seconds, they're moving enormous weight for a full minute sometimes. Or
how about
30
this?
seconds. Yeah. Oh my
5
God.
max effort events.
Right.
And
the same day.
I adjust you on the front side, and you don't need an adjustment after. That happens a lot too.
No kidding.
That's pretty cool. That's very cool.
That's awesome. Some in the events now, they have to do the preliminary events, 5 of those, just to make to the finals and do 5 more. Gross.
Yep. But you know what though? I mean, just even how you step, getting in there and setting an ankle can actually lighten your pressure, your foot pressure. And would you believe I actually have the only study in the world that assesses balance and foot pressures and the ability of enhanced movement to where that foot pressure is lightened up to 90 pounds on each foot. And so, yeah, if you go to inchiropractic.com and go to the research, we actually have done that. And there's not another study in the world like it.
That's awesome.
Just showing the effectiveness. I look at it like this. I always challenge my work. And I challenge my work because I want to know. I want to know. If I'm going to tell somebody something, I want to know that what I'm saying is accurate.
This theme seems to be reoccurring, that I'm going to keep pushing. And you're not at the point where you have to sink or swim, but you're in this habit now of, before, when you're in the sink or swim season of your life, you simply apply that to your business and your craft. Keep pushing, evolve. The term for that is Kaizen, always constantly improving. So,
well, it doesn't make you very popular, I'll tell you that much.
Well, usually the evolution requires some type of discomfort, resistance, challenge, change, even in the body, right? You have to manipulate that to open things up. So,
well, and try to create and develop a new habituation.
Changing people's behaviors, all that jazz. Constantly swimming upstream, fighting battles, and then 25 years later, they put you on the payroll at World's Strongest Man. So.
Right. Well, and and I've got a lot of other opportunities. I sit the board of the International Chiropractors Association, which was designed to help get chiropractors out of jail back in 1926 for practicing medicine without a license.
We don't look that old.
Well, the board has been around that long. I get to sit in the seats that all those hot dogs did back in the day, right?
Gotcha.
But I was just asked to go ahead and assume the chairman position for the chiropractic, or the International Chiropractors Association Council on Fitness and Health Science. And so my task there is to actually develop programs for chiropractors worldwide, with a focus on adjusting athletes in particular. And so that is a hefty job that I've been tasked with. But I'm in process right now developing a team of chiropractors worldwide to help me with that.
That's amazing. When you work with these athletes at the highest level, one of the things we're always looking for tips and tricks and habits and things like that, things that you've observed. And I remember Bill Kazmaier was being interviewed once about his level of intensity and focus. And when you're getting ready to lift some things that are, if you make a mistake, like we saw the guy at the Arnold a couple years ago on the log press when he blew out both of his knees, right?
Yeah, that was tough because JF he's a good dude, right? And that was hard. It was hard to see that, but I held his hand and said, "Buddy, you got to go. You got to go."
What are some commonalities on those athletes' mindsets? On game day, things that you witnessed.
Something I can relate to. Failure is not an option.
Right.
You go until your body won't go, and I can appreciate that. I got mad respect for people that will push themselves to that level, because I recognize it for what it is, and it is overcoming yourself, overcoming resistance to not only what's inside, but the external forces. And it is amazing what the human body will do. It's an old jujitsu proverb where the head goes, the body follows.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of truth to that.
Also, if they're not all in on their focus, they can be looking at significant injury, not necessarily just winning or losing, but you put a 1,200-pound yoke on your back and you're not paying attention, you're distracted.
Yeah, you have to have major focus. And, one year at the Arnolds, they did over 1,600-pound yokes.
Yeah.
And so, walking on coals, with Tony Robbins, or putting a 1,600-pound yoke on your back, I think the yoke is worse.
Way worse. Way worse.
But you have to believe that your body will do it. It's not, be mealy mouth and maybe it'll work today. I don't know. I've never seen Jerry Pritchett look at, a deadlift bar and go, yeah, I might not get that today.
Not that guy.
Never.
When it comes to deadlifting, that dude knows he's just picking it up, whatever's put in front of him. Big Z, Zadrunas, I met him at the Arnold, and I was just like, I had to ask, like, hey, are these stats really true? Like, on being on the podium, he goes, for his entire career, 80% of the time he's been on the podium, every event. And I said, when you're training with your teammates and stuff, how do you focus so much in this training? And is that thick Lithuanian accent? He says, when we train, we don't listen to any music. I go, really? He said, yeah, I don't want any of that stimulus. I don't want people cheering, people getting hyped up or ramped up or whatever. I want to be able to dial in introspectively, focus, hit my lifts in training so that when I'm on stage, music is blasting, people are clapping and cheering. I can have that extra little piece of adrenaline to surge through me so that I can do a little bit more on game day. Dang, man. I got people complain all the time in gym, they don't like this music or that. And I'm like, that becomes almost a dependency.
It is. Yeah, because, listen, if you go and you look at society today, all the kids need dopamine hits. All of them. They can't survive without a dopamine hit. I mean, they're like, okay, well, listen, let me get some, stimulant drink. I'm not going to name a brand, but some type of stimulant drink. Whether it be a pre-workout or or whatever. But you know what I'm saying. And or the music or somebody has to slap them 100 times or which I get it. But I kind of lean a little bit more towards, what Z does, and really, even if you just talk to Z, just talking to him, he is the most chill dude all the time. I mean, that's just him. Yep. But I get that. I mean, finding your center, even, to, reference the chiropractic stuff that I do, all that loud pounding music. And somehow I always find myself next to the speaker that's about ready to blow out my left ear, right?
I hate that shit.
I don't know what that's all about. But, trying to get my Zen before I start treating athletes, that's a thing too.
Right.
To where you get that center and, you're actually blocking out the noise so that you can put all your energy, positive energy into that patient or that athlete in this case. But it's the same kind of thing. People don't realize that, me trying to get my head in that right place so that I can be consistent is not any different than the strongman athlete getting in their zone, or the track athlete, or the CrossFitter, or the power lifter. It's the same mechanism, and that's stuff I learned in the gym myself.
Yep.
So there's the crossover, right?
There's so many lessons. The thing is, you can focus really hard on the task at hand, and what's challenging with me, I could be not fighting with, but there's resistance in me versus the athletes trying to get them to perform because they don't want to do some things I'm playing. And I see it. I'm like, yes, we're doing this. And there's that aggression. You're trying to do that resistance, get that person to perform. Then you got to go home and flip that switch in a 10 or 20-minute car ride, walk in, say hello to your wife and kids, give them a kiss hello, and be like, not pissed off, ready to rip their heads off, right?
Yeah. I mean, you become that which you're around. I mean, you do. I listen. You hear me talk. I talk like this all the time. I talk like this in my office. This is who I am now. Some of it is that guy who got smashed in the machine and had to fight his way out because there was nobody else. Fortunately for me, I met my wife. She was one of my nurses in the hospital, so I came away out ahead, right? But it is. Some people can't hang with that, but I think you just kind of try and settle into whatever level of that thing, that personality, that drive, whatever it is. But I don't think it ever leaves you. You just have to figure out how to adapt it to your environment, right?
One of the things I wanted to ask you, because I asked you a couple of questions, in preparation for today.
Mm-hmm.
When you're dealing with athletes, and especially those in the gym, and you're lifting all that weight, and naturally there's going to be some ego floating around every once in a while in any kind of competition.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And it's definitely no different in strength sports. But one of the things you said about dealing with teammates, you learned that there's no need to be in charge. It's about working with competent other professionals as a group. Talk about that a little bit, about how do you need to put your ego aside and work with others and advance the team.
I think, the first thing that has to happen is ask yourself why you're there. If you're there at an event for yourself, then go home. If you're there to focus on that athlete, focus on the athlete, do your job. Everybody that's on your team should do the same thing. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have fun and enjoy it and, take pictures. And, I videotape pretty much every encounter that I have. 2 reasons. One, if something goes horribly wrong, I have record of it. 2, it's good education for other people that my goal is to help them take care of athletes across the board. But another component of it is that I can't wait to share these athletes and their successes. But sometimes the only love that they get is from the photos that maybe I take or a video that I take, and then I share it on social media with people. It's a great opportunity for them. And, I don't have 10 million followers like you do, Jim, but I look at it like this. I figure, for the 3,500 or so that I have, a lot of those people have never met Big Z, or they've never met Thor, or they've never met Brian Shaw or Obi or, Stoltman Brothers or whoever. And it's like, when I do that, because I have a myriad of people that I'm friends with, it's an opportunity for them to be, to expand their fan base, these athletes. It's a lot of fun.
Sure.
So I love sharing, the interactions that we have. And it's kind of cool, But I think that as a whole, the focus should always be the athlete and what we can do to make them better and perform better. And if nothing else, make them at least comfortable on their flight home.
They're usually in pain, and then they're usually trying to take up 2 seats, and they only all had room for 1, right?
Right. Yeah. True.
Yep.
So, but no, I've been very blessed to have people that have come into my world. I've also had some other people that have come into the world, and it was about them, and you catch on rather quickly. I try not to, I've worked hard for my reputation. I've worked very hard. I've sacrificed a lot for my reputation. There are people that will hang on to your coattails and try and assume the mantle, if you want to call it that. I don't know that I have a mantle necessarily because, like I said, most times it's a volunteer gig. So, I mean, you got to earn your own reputation, right? But in today's Instagram world, a lot of people say, wow, I worked with him for 5 minutes and now that makes me the expert. So, and I've dealt with a few people that have done that to me. and it's very, very disappointing.
In every organization or family or friend group, business, sport, team, there's always some type of politics that occur.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you've witnessed in the last 5-10 years in the strongman world, powerlifting world, that you think, what, it's not nearly it's not as much fun as I once liked, or I'm not really loving where that's going right now?
Well, you got to remember, I mean, we kind of touched base on this. I used to work on athletes from IFSA, which was the Canadian strongman organization. I was around when NAS had two S's,
Right.
And now, you go and you look at Strongman Corp and all the different directions it's morphed. A lot of organizations I've worked with no longer exist. A lot of people, coaches, trainers, athletes, they're gone. They're not around anymore. So for me, I think I've done a pretty good job of straddling the fence, playing Switzerland, so to speak, for a lot of years, for 25 years, going on
Right.
26 this year. I think the big secret on that is, I'm not here to tell anybody else how to run their business. I'm here for athletes first, and I think that's going to remain my focus. And for the most part, athletes truly, truly appreciated the fact that I came, the fact that I was volunteering, the fact that I was there to help them, and the expectations with today's athlete have changed, and I don't like it. I don't like it. There's a sense of entitlement that I see in a lot of athletes. Not all of them. I'm going to throw the baby out the bathwater, but the sense of entitlement, the fear of being overlooked or overshadowed by whoever, whether it be athletes or other people. The dysfunctional relationships are worse than ever for the majority of, I'm not going to say the majority, but for a lot of the athletes. They're on the struggle bus. A lot of that is society-based, I think. Divorce rates at roughly 65% for first-time marriages. And then how pretty much everybody treats each other like they're an old microwave, they're going to get thrown away. Maybe it makes sense that there is that fear. It's a real thing, right? But there is a level of disrespect that I'm seeing, a lack of appreciation, and like I said, it's becoming more and more difficult to participate, from my perspective, and that makes me sad.
Sure.
Because the athletes need it. They need it. I mean, I've been able to keep people to the point, in the contest, that they've been able to go ahead and make top 10, at OSG, for example, when they thought that they were done. Or some, Shannon Clifford a few years ago, Paul carried her over like 4 or 5 times to my table. We patched her up, sent her back out. She won the world title. We can do amazing things, but when you get to a point that you're starting to see the appreciation dwindle, it's just not good. And whether it be promoters or whether it be the athletes themselves, I've like I said, I've straddled the fence for a lot of years, and I pretty much attached my wagon to Lynn Morehouse in official strongman games, because I've seen everything. I know everybody. And Lynn is a class act. And I'm not saying the other people are not. But at this stage, I'm 58 years old. I might have 20 more years on this earth, if I'm lucky. I want to enjoy those last several years if I can, and hedge my bets a little bit. And
it's always been a little different for me. The times I've judged at the Arnold, or run the contests at my own place, I'm always dealing with, the amateurs. There's the novice classes. They're not even at the open class. Then you got to win open to go to nationals, win nationals, then get a shot at worlds. And so, like me, my highest level of achievement, that was just at an amateur level. And compared to the rest of the world, we were all very, very strong. But compared to the strongman world, we're pretty weak on a relative basis. A lot of these folks, they're just happy to hit a PR. They're happy that some of their other friends came and watched them, compete at something. Well, they're simply happy that there's an event because, by and large, most states don't have competitions where you can even come pick up stupid shit, which for me, the definition of strongman. We just pick up dumb stuff. So at the amateur level, it's still fresher and different. You meet new and upcoming people, and they're just happy to flip a 700-pound tire, or
Absolutely.
pick up a big log. And so I don't really.
Well, that's why I enjoy, coming to your events, for example, the Janus events and those kinds of things and some of the smaller contests. But, it probably sounds silly. That's like, hey, yeah, just give me a t-shirt,
Right.
I've got some of your t-shirts hanging in my office, for example,
I appreciate that.
But, I struggle. I've had, I've gone to shows that I thought I had a room, for example, and end up going and not having a room in the middle of a very, very busy city. Thinking that some things were paid for and turns out they weren't. Not even being bothered to, people not introducing you. I've worked hard, like I said, for my reputation, but I'm going to show up, at least recognize me.
Sure.
And it's almost like, sometimes you're an afterthought, and that's disappointing. I would say probably, somewhat hurtful, if I'm going to be honest. How much do you have to give?
Right.
To feel like, you deserve a little recognition. And all the time I've been, involved, the only award I've ever had in strongman was from Dion with Strongman Corp. It's the only award I've ever received from the strongman organizations ever.
But also,
and I'm not complaining, but I'm just saying it's interesting that, it's like I said, it's afterthoughts. That's just one of those things.
In a whole different group at Swiss last year, though, Lifetime Achievement Award, right?
Yeah, dude. To be recognized by people who are, medical doctors, coaches, trainers, the top in the world, that's what Ken Kanakins puts together at the Society for Weight Training Injury, Specialists. And he started that, 20 some years ago. And, so he tied in with Dave Tate, and they've had it at Columbus the last 2 years, in which case he's asked me to speak at both of those. 2018, he wanted me to come up to Canada, and I wasn't able to go because I already had a commitment. But no, to get that award, I was literally blown away. But yeah, that was from outside, but it had to do with my 20-some years, 25 years in strongman, and what I've learned, and what it is I'm trying to do to share that knowledge now. And I think that's probably what my role is going to if I can get chiropractors to jump on board and try and decide to be a chiropractor again, and instead of trying to do your job, Jim.
Sure. Right. The hard pill to swallow that you talk about those feel entitled, which happens at every generation in every industry, but the true level of impact and greatness takes decades, not just this week or I got a 5-year run here. No, it takes a lot more than that.
Well, a lot of these athletes, that's all they have.
Right.
I always said a strongman cycle is about 5 years.
It really is at the high level. I don't know what the numbers. I wonder what the mortality rate is for those folks, because they're big folks. A lot of work on their heart. A lot of damage from all that. Loads of Bulgarian.
The other thing, the thing I will say, as far as athletes are concerned, athletes are in better physical condition than what they were 25 years ago. a lot of people like yourself are doing a great job working with these athletes, making sure that they're being trained correctly. The only thing that I would say as a whole for anybody that's listening who happens to be a coach or a trainer, exercise phys, is tie in a great chiropractor in your area, somebody that actually is a master skilled adjuster that understands the body and understands how to do an adjustment and knows how to read a freaking x-ray. Just remember this, folks. The more data that you have, the more you can make good decisions and allow the athlete to make good decisions because you have more information to make decisions from. And then if you can tie that in with the coaches, the trainers, and everyone else that you can and be part of the team.
Right.
But see, the problem is in
Takes a
today's
village.
society, everybody wants to be the guy. Well, if you've got to be the guy all the time, the athlete's who suffers.
That's right.
And it shouldn't be that way. But people really are. I mean, it's amazing to me how, I'll have an athlete and they'll say, oh yeah, well, I'm getting chiropractic care and they're doing this and this and this, and none of it has to do with adjusting.
I don't get that.
I'm going, then you're not going to a chiropractor.
Yeah, I've never seen that, thank God.
Yeah, it's insane,
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, you're a rubber band therapist. Great. You're a massage therapist. Okay, so you're you think you're an acupuncturist today. Oh, you're a dry needler today. Okay, you're a stretch therapist today. Okay, what about adjusting? Yeah, they don't do that. What about seriously?
That's ridiculous.
Really? But the whole profession's moving that direction, and it's okay. It's not okay. We're about ready to lose the most priceless gift to humanity called chiropractic. We're about ready to lose it. And honestly, if I can't make a impact in the next 10 years, it'll be gone in 20. And then you'll have the physical therapist saying they're doing a chiropractic adjustment. You have the massage therapist saying they're doing a chiropractic adjustment. You have the athletic trainer saying they're doing a chiropractic adjustment. Oh, guess what? It's already happening.
Well, we'll work not to let that happen there, Doc.
Go team.
I know you're busy. I'm very fortunate to have you on the show, but I got just a few more rapid fire questions to see if we can learn a little bit more about you, if that's cool.
I don't know. People are probably sick of me already.
So I know you travel all over the world with your craft and working at a contest. What's a bucket list adventure you'd still want to do? Maybe you and your wife, or just someplace you want to go and see.
You know what? I've resorted to feeling as though it's okay to have simple.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, if I could find a spot in the woods, build a little cabin, light a fire, watch the deer in the morning, drink my coffee, good enough.
Oh boy. Favorite sports movie?
Oh, what's the now here we go. What was the one with the Sandra Bullock in it? It has the kid that was adopted by the family.
The Blind Side?
Yes, Blind Side.
Pretty good,
Love
right?
that movie. Yeah, I enjoy that. But Rudy, I like Rudy the best.
The underdog just kind of sticking with it, gets his one shot at the end, makes the tackle.
It's kind of a theme with me, isn't it?
Sure, it's pervasive. Favorite sport to watch?
Do you know what? I still get charged up about wrestling.
Like Hulk Hogan wrestling, or like Greco-Roman wrestling, kind of.
Greco-Roman wrestling, but you know what? Another thing, and it sounds crazy. I mean, I love that, but I also love women's gymnastics. And again, in both of those cases, who is it? It's man against man. It's woman against the machine. It's the individual overcoming gravity when it comes to gymnastics.
Teddy Roosevelt, Man in the Arena.
Oh yes.
Yeah, right.
Can I read that to you real quick?
Fire away.
It's to me this is probably one of my favorite quotes, and it's by Theodore Roosevelt, and it's titled "The Man in the Arena." It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how strong men stumble, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes again and again, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
Love it. Favorite book for you?
Favorite book? I don't know that I have one, honestly. Okay. I enjoy Clive Cussler series.
Me too. I liked Isaac Bell, all the detectives back in the day, in the early 1900s in that series, Clive Cussler. Favorite superhero?
Wow. Do you know, I really vacillate between Superman and Captain America.
Nice. Favorite villain?
The Joker. I love his sense of humor.
So twisted. When you were lifting, what was your favorite lift?
You know, I would say it used to be the bench press until I tore a pec. And then it got to a point it was that deadlift because I was excelling so greatly. Now I just like lifting myself out of the chair.
Right.
But, that's what happens when you almost get 60, I guess, and the knees are kind of like, well, I made it down here. Now what? I might make it back up. So let's see what happens.
You got a physically demanding job. Hey, Doc, man, thanks so much for the time today. Really enjoyed it. Always good catching up. I'm sure our paths will cross again this year. So, and I love watching you from afar. What's that?
At least in a month or so, I think.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, listen, Jim, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for this. And it's always good to participate in anything that you do because everything you do turns out awesome.
Yeah, I'm trying, but not quite yet. Not quite there yet. We'll just keep at it.
You bet. You and me, man. Go team.
That's right. Thanks again, Doc.
You bet, man. Thank you.